Hey everyone, welcome back to Kubernetes series on the channel Pydjango-Tutorial. So far, we have learned about pods, deployments, services. But now it's time to explore something just as important, config maps and secrets. These are the building blocks that help us manage configurations and sensitive data inside the Kubernetes cluster. So by the end of this video, you'll know what config map and secret is, why we need them, how to create them and use in a pod, and what are the key difference between them. Imagine you're deploying an app and you need database connection strings or API URLs or maybe a password. Now you don't want to hard code this information directly inside your pod or pod manifest. Why? Because changing the secret means redeploying the entire deployment or entire pods. Plus, if it's a sensitive information like password, API keys, or database connection string or access keys, storing it in a plain YAML is a security risk, and you should avoid that at any condition. So this is where secrets and config maps comes in. So first, let's talk about the config map. Config map is used for storing non-sensitive configuration data, things like environment variables, configurations file, or command line arguments that you need for your application. So think of it as a dictionary with key value pairs which parts can use. Example use case can be like storing environments. For example, environment can be dev or prod depending upon the use case. Storing external service URLs or configuration flags. On the contrary, let's understand what secret is. So a secret is almost as same as config maps, but it's specifically meant for sensitive data like passwords, API keys, tokens, and SSH keys and certificates. So the key difference between them is config maps are stored in plain text, so no encoding needed there, whereas secrets are encoded in base 64, so encoding is needed. These can be used by pods to access sensitive information, whereas config maps can be used by pods to access configuration settings. Security-wise, secret is much more secure than having a config map because it is kept private and used to control access to sensitive data using RBAC. Now, if you don't know what RBAC is, don't worry for now. Let's just say it's a way to authorize permissions or authorize access within the Kubernetes cluster. Now, examples of secrets can be, as I told you, API keys, database passwords, whereas for config maps, it can be application settings, flags, feature flags, and whatnot. So let's quickly compare them one more time. Config maps for non-sensitive configurations, secret for sensitive configurations. Both can be mounted onto the pod as environment variables or volume inside the pods. If you don't know what volume is, don't worry. We'll understand what volume mounts and volumes are. But for now, just remember that these can be mounted as volumes as well. Now, best practice is use secrets for anything private and config map for anything else. So let's understand everything with a short demo. So very first thing we'll do is create a config map. Now I'll show you another way of creating resources within Kubernetes as well. This is not widely used, but this is just for demo purpose. So make sure you have a Docker desktop running because that's where Minikube image is coming from. So once you have that, come on to your Ubuntu terminal and say Minikube start. So our Minikube is running. Now if you want to check the status of the Minikube, you can say Minikube. You can say Minikube status. And our control plane and the host is running. That means our Minikube is running. Now today I'll show you the new way of creating the manifest or the resources within Kubernetes. So I have this command here. I will copy paste the command in the description of the video as well. You can just copy it from there. So let me just paste it and I'll explain what's going on here. So I'm saying kubectl create config map. So I'm saying that create a resource of type config map from literal app env So app environment I'm giving as dev, and app URL I'm giving as dev.example.com. So my config map contains two data. One is environment and one is URL of the application. I have my config map created. Now I can see the YAML of it that's created by the Kubernetes itself. So I can say kubectl get config map. By the way, you can get config map by just saying CM as well. So that's like short abbreviation for config map. So you can say kubectl get config map or CM app config, because that's the name of my config map -o YAML. So this is what's being created by using this command. So I have my API version. So config map also belongs to the core API version v1. I have two data. One is environment, one is URL. Then what kind of resource it is? Obviously, it's a config map. Then bunch of metadata, timestamp, resource, namespace, resource version, and UID. Now, similarly, we can create secrets as well. So I'm going to copy paste the command. Now I'm creating a secret named db secret of type generic. There are types of secret. We'll understand what each type of secrets are later on, but this is essentially a db secret. I'm giving my user and my password. Let's hit enter. Now if I do kubectl get secret, name of my secret is db secret -o YAML. So similar to ConfigMap, we have our YAML here as well. And the only difference is these things are encoded now. So this is base 64 encoded user and base 64 encoded password. Now that we have our ConfigMap and secret, let's understand how to use them in our pod. So I have my pod YAML file, but if you remember from my previous video or from my deployment video, we are using deployment YAML to manage our pods. So let's come to our deployment configurations. And within containers, I can say env from. Now, my config map is app config, and my secret is db secret. If I copy path for this deployment now and reapply this, so kubectl apply -f, then the path. Now, of course, I need to change the path to Linux path. This should be /mnt/c. If I hit enter, my deployment is configured. If I get my deployment, kubectl get deployment, and then the name of the deployment, which is demo nginx deploy. So I have 5 replicas which are running. If I get the pods, kubectl get pods. So these are my 5 pods. You can see from their ages as well, and this is managed by the deployment name this. Now, how can we verify that our pod has access to the secrets and config maps? We can do that by execing into one of the pods and grepping or searching for the environment variables. How we do that is through a command, but if you don't know what execing into the pod means, execing essentially means that SSH into one of the pods. How we do this is kubectl exec -it and then the name of the pod. So for name of the pod, I have to get my pods. So let's do that first. Kubectl get pods. So this is my pod. Let's say I'm checking the first pod. Let me just copy this. Now kubectl exec -it, then the pod, and then env. And I want to grep for app, let's say env. Oh, wrong command. This should be exec. So you see, we have the environment equals to dev, which is used by this pod. Similarly, if I, let's say, search for db underscore because that's the data we have set in secrets. You see my pod has the user and the password which it can use. So that's how we specify secrets and config maps in the pod, and that's how pods can use config maps and secrets. So let's do a quick recap. We have to use config maps for normal configurations and settings. We have to use secrets for sensitive data. And keep everything separate from your pod definitions for flexibility and security. So that's the end of this video. In the next video, we'll take one step further and understand what daemon sets are and how we can use daemon sets in our Kubernetes. Now, if you found this video helpful, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and check out the full Kubernetes playlist on the channel Pydjango-Tutorial. And stay tuned for the next video. Thank you so much for watching.